In a much-anticipated meeting, U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy sat down in the Oval Office to discuss a critical minerals agreement aimed at strengthening Ukraine's economy and its ability to withstand Russian aggression. However, what was expected to be a diplomatic success quickly turned into a tense and contentious exchange, resulting in an abrupt end to the discussions. Despite efforts from diplomatic aides to keep the conversation on track, the meeting deteriorated into a heated argument over Ukraine's reliance on U.S. aid, the war with Russia, and the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations. President Zelenskyy left Washington without signing the expected agreement, leaving many questions about the direction of future cooperation between the two nations. The purpose of the meeting. The February 28th meeting was intended to serve as a pivotal moment in U.S.-Ukraine relations. With the ongoing war against Russia, Ukraine was seeking further security guarantees, economic support, and assistance in securing access to critical minerals, which are vital for military and technological advancements. The minerals deal was expected to facilitate greater collaboration between American and Ukrainian industries, ensuring that Ukraine could better utilize its natural resources while strengthening its defense capabilities. President Trump, who has long advocated for a more isolationist foreign policy, was skeptical about continuing long-term financial and military support for Ukraine. His administration's position was that the U.S. should focus on domestic priorities rather than getting entangled in foreign conflicts. Nevertheless, the meeting was arranged with the expectation that both sides would find common ground to move forward. Tensions escalate in the Oval Office. From the outset, the meeting carried an air of formality, with the two leaders exchanging pleasantries for the cameras before proceeding behind closed doors. However, sources within the White House indicated that the discussion took a sharp turn shortly after it began. While addressing the minerals agreement, President Trump raised concerns about Ukraine's handling of U.S. aid and questioned whether continued American support was yielding meaningful results. Vice President J.D. Vance, who was also present, pressed Zelenskyy on whether Ukraine was making sufficient efforts to negotiate peace with Russia. According to reports, Trump accused Zelenskyy of being disrespectful toward the generosity of the American government and taxpayers. He suggested that Ukraine should show more appreciation for the billions of dollars in aid it had received and demonstrate a willingness to make concessions for peace. Zelenskyy, clearly taken aback by the accusations, firmly rejected the notion that Ukraine had not shown gratitude. He reminded Trump and his administration that Ukraine was not just fighting for itself, but for the security of Europe and democratic nations as a whole. He emphasized that cutting U.S. aid or forcing Ukraine into unfavorable negotiations with Russia would ultimately strengthen Russian President Vladimir Putin's position. As the discussion became more intense, both leaders reportedly raised their voices. Trump repeatedly questioned whether Ukraine could sustain itself without American assistance, while Zelenskyy countered by highlighting the human cost of the war and the strategic importance of U.S. involvement in deterring Russian expansionism. White House aides attempted to redirect the conversation toward the economic benefits of the minerals agreement, but the tension in the room had already reached a breaking point. The meeting ends in disagreement. As frustration grew, President Trump abruptly stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Without further discussion, he canceled the planned signing ceremony for the minerals deal, effectively shutting down what had been months of negotiations. President Zelenskyy, visibly disappointed, left the White House without speaking to the press. However, later in the day, he issued a statement on social media, thanking the American people for their continued support and expressing hope that the two nations would find a way to cooperate despite the setback. For many political analysts, the breakdown of this meeting was seen as a major turning point in U.S.-Ukraine relations. What had once been a strong alliance was now clouded with uncertainty, with the future of American support for Ukraine hanging in the balance. Global and domestic reactions, international concerns. The fallout from the meeting was immediate, drawing strong reactions from leaders around the world. European leaders expressed concern over the growing rift between the U.S. and Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz reaffirmed their commitment to supporting Ukraine, emphasizing that European nations could not afford to let divisions weaken their collective response to Russian aggression. Russia, on the other hand, welcomed the news. Russian officials called the failed meeting a sign of waning Western support for Ukraine, with Kremlin spokespersons suggesting that Ukraine would eventually have to negotiate peace on Russia's terms. Reactions in the United States within the U.S. The meeting's outcome sparked immediate political debate. Republicans largely defended President Trump's position, arguing that America should not be endlessly funding foreign conflicts without clear strategic benefits. Many praised Trump for putting America first and demanding accountability for the aid given to Ukraine. Democrats strongly criticized the administration's approach, warning that undermining support for Ukraine would embolden Russia and damage U.S. credibility among allies. Many called the failed meeting a diplomatic blunder that could have long-term consequences for international stability. In Congress, some lawmakers pushed for a reassessment of U.S. foreign aid policies, with discussions emerging about whether military assistance to Ukraine should be scaled back, maintained, or even increased. With no agreement reached and growing tensions between Washington and Kyiv, the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations remains uncertain. The minerals deal, once seen as a symbol of economic cooperation, is now stalled, and Ukraine faces increased challenges in securing necessary resources. President Zelenskyy, following the meeting, engaged in discussions with European leaders, seeking alternative avenues for support. Meanwhile, in the U.S., political analysts speculate on whether Trump's administration will continue to distance itself from Ukraine or if there will be efforts to mend ties in the coming months. As the war in Ukraine continues, this failed meeting marks a critical moment that could shape the geopolitical landscape for years to come. Whether the U.S. and Ukraine can rebuild their diplomatic relationship remains to be seen. But for now, the outcome of the Oval Office meeting has left more questions than answers.